Hello and good morning, everybody. We'd like to welcome the East Coast, the West Coast, and our friends from around the world. My name is Kunoor Jain-Spangler. I am taking over the duties of running the Fellow Project series from Dr. Dan. I'd like to take a couple moments to do some housekeeping this morning. And first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Dan. So Adrian, for the last 2 years, you made me look good and you kept me laughing. Thank you so much. You are a true Renaissance man. Adrian is a powerhouse surgeon from a clinical standpoint and a dedicated educator and researcher. But overall, you're just an awesome human being and colleague, and working with you for the last 2 years has been an incredible opportunity. Fun fact about Adrian, he and his wife keep bees on their farm, and they really, truly do make the sweetest honey. So thank you, Adrian. For the fellows, so welcome to your fellowship year. This fellow project series has been a 2-year work of love and passion, I think, for all of us on the Bariatric Surgery Training Committee. We have archived all the webinars. They're available free online, so please feel free to check them all out. Use them as part of your didactic requirement for the ASMBS certificate. And speaking of that certificate, if you are planning on applying, the application is available online now. So please check it out, look at the case requirements, look at the clinic requirements, start keeping your logs now. It will just make it so much easier for you at the end of the year. And speaking of ASMBS, I encourage you, I think we all would encourage you to join as a candidate member. Providing free webinars is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to ASMBS. There really is, this is, if you're going to go into metabolic surgery, ASMBS is where you want to be. So please consider joining. And finally, the last thing I want to touch on before I introduce our illustrious speaker. The Fellowship Council has a new parental and medical leave recommendation. So for all of you fellows to know about, fellows who take parental, pregnancy, or medical leave are required to perform a minimum of 44 weeks. So that's up to 8 weeks off. So that's 44 weeks of clinical time during the fellowship. Gestational fellows and or non-gestational partners must be allowed to freely attend visits and appointments. And gestational parents are to be provided lactational facilities and time to address lactation needs. There are additional recommendations regarding work hours and call time scheduling. So please check that out. And to our fellowship directors that are on, please make yourselves aware of this as well. So today we're starting hopefully what is a new tradition in which the immediate past president of the ASMBS will be giving us a lecture. And so Dr. Kothari, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Kothari is currently the Jean and Harlan Stone Chair of the Department of Surgery at Prisma Health in Greenville. He is a professor of surgery at the University of South Carolina. Prior to his current tenure in South Carolina, he was in practice for 18 years at the Gunderson Clinic in La Crosse, Wisconsin. He earned his medical degree from the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Peoria and completed a general surgery residency at Gunderson and his fellowship in minimally invasive and bariatric surgery at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. Go VCU. Dr. Kothari established a minimally invasive bariatric surgery program at Gunderson and served as its director from 2001 until 2019. He also established a minimally invasive bariatric surgery and advanced laparoscopy fellowship in 2003 and served as a fellowship director since its inception until 2019. Dr. Kothari is past president of the Wisconsin Surgical Society, which is a chapter of the American College of Surgeons. Dr. Kothari has authored over 130 publications in peer-reviewed journals, 18 book chapters, and has served as a senior editor of the 2011 and 2021 Surgical Clinics of North America issues dedicated to metabolic and bariatric surgery. He is an editor of Obesity Care in Bariatric Surgery and associate editor of Evidence-Based Approach to Minimally Invasive Surgery, as well as an associate editor for Surgery for Obesity and related diseases. He is currently the first vice president of the Fellowship Council, the immediate past president of the Southwestern Surgical Congress, and the immediate past president of the American Society for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery. Dr. Kothari, I have no idea how you do it. Your wingspan is just incredible, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate having you here today to talk to us about an overview of bariatric surgery in the United States. Thank you again.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Kunoor, and Adrian as well. I just want to thank you both for your vision and leadership for this really important contribution to fellowship training. This is fantastic. Adrian was able to take this from vision to reality in a very short amount of time. And you were mentioning about the surgical clinics of North America, and of course they're done every 5 years, and so it was bookended by me, but the one that you missed in the middle was the one edited by Adrian Dan, which is pretty awesome as well in terms of the respected thought leaders in this space. And so really excited for the privilege of kicking this off, so to speak, with the new fellows of this year. We're really excited what's in store for you for a very busy year that's going to significantly change the course of your life, and certainly hopefully for the better. So I think we'll go ahead and dive into this. Are you able to see my screen? All right. So these are my disclosures. Should have nothing to do with this specific talk. It's truly a privilege to have been president of such a distinguished society. I was the 35th president, and to think about the history of the society, and little did I ever think when I was a fellow 22 years ago that I would have the privilege of joining the ranks of those that I considered such icons and looked up to in our society as presidents. And so the important thing to know is some of you on this call will be in ASMBS leadership someday. And somebody's going to have to be president as well in your generation. So hopefully it's going to be some of you that are on the call today. We're really excited about your contributions in the years to come. And the foundation you're going to get in this next year is really what's going to set the stage for that. So just a little something about how the ASMBS leadership structure is. We have the ASMBS Executive Council, the current members of which are listed here. And of the Executive Council is the Executive Committee. So the Executive Committee is the Secretary Treasurer, President-elect, President, and past President. So those four individuals are part of the Executive Committee. And then we sit on the Executive Committee. On the broader group of the board is the Executive Council, which you see here listed as the other members. And what's very unique, and so if you become elected as Secretary Treasurer, you will eventually proceed to the presidency. That's the path to the presidency. But you actually have to have qualifications to meet those to be the future president or Secretary Treasurer, and that being you have to be on the Executive Council. And how do you get on the Executive Council? You have to have at least been a committee chair, co-chair, or state chapter president. And so there are pathways to leadership, and we have criteria for all of those. And at the end of the day, of course, we're going to want you to join a committee and start making your contributions and distinguishing yourself that way. The ASMBS is very unique in that we're one of the few societies where you, the membership, actually pick your leadership. And so there are formal ballots and votes. And so by the membership, so you pick the members of the Executive Council and you pick your future president. Unlike many other societies where this is just a ratification and it's done at the board level and they come out and tell you basically who the next president is, and that ballot is done because the bylaws require it, but there's no other person really to pick other than a write-in vote. So you as the ASMBS membership pick your leaders. And so everyone here has won merit-based votes to get to where they're at. And of course, I had the privilege a few years ago of winning the Secretary Treasurer position to then rise up to president, and now I am past president. And just to let you know the level of work that this group does. So the executive committee, those 4 individuals meet every week for between 1 to 2 hours calls. And you would think, what is there to talk about? And honestly, we often can't even get done our list of agenda items within that amount of time. Then there are extra calls that are put on during that time as well. And then whatever emergencies may arise that we deal with as well. And then the executive council is the true governing board. So the executive committee is in operations. The executive council, on the other hand, is the governing board. So they make financial decisions and anything that is a true board vote is done at the executive council level. So it's a nice system of checks and balances between the executive committee and the executive council. Our integrated health colleagues have a similar path for leadership, and they make up quite a large contingent of our ASMBS membership. So they too have their own presidents, secretary treasurer, past president, and president-elect, as you could see here. And then they have their same board meetings, they have their board retreats, but they work very closely with us as well. We do a lot of collaboration together, particularly around projects that, let's say there's an update on nutritional guidelines or something of that nature. Of course, they would be the lead on that. If it's surgical, we'll be the lead on that, but we're going to have IH representation on the authorship as we move forward, so that it's a very balanced work product that comes out of that as well. So you're going to, very few surgical specialties do work so closely with other integrated health specialists such as in ASMBS. So of course, wherever you end up, we're going to encourage you to have all of your integrated health colleagues become members of ASMBS as well. Obviously, you're in your fellowship. It's a very special year. I've had the privilege of training the ones that you see listed here. Hard to think, when I look back on this list, this is really the most important part of my CV, actually. And to think in 2003, I'm just not even 2 years out of practice, I had the vision to start a fellowship, and I can't believe somebody actually wanted to come and train with me. But the real legacy is when I left my practice and moved to warmer weather and literally greener pastures in South Carolina, is that my fellowship, my program didn't collapse. It's thriving. It's not only just surviving, it's thriving because it's got 3 of my former fellows are still running it, and they're doing more cases and more volume than ever. And so that's the true legacy, and look forward to your contributions during your fellow year as well. Like I said, you're joining a real elite club. I call it you're going to join the SEAL Team 6 of surgery now, and not everybody is going to have your level of technical skills, understanding of anatomy, the clinical judgment of this patient population, and empathy. And so one thing I wanted to do when I was president at our annual meeting was to show the roots of where it started from Ed Mason into this. And this isn't, of course, nowhere near, but it was all of us here. You can see Muhammad Ali, who was the fellow of the year after me. We've been great friends for over 20 years now. And then there he is putting all of his fellows that he trained, because he trained at the same program I did in VCU. So now we've gone from fellows to grand fellows to great grand fellows. So it's quite a legacy that traces all the way back to Ed Mason, including my former chairman and partner, who was trained by Ed Mason. So it's a great legacy that you're joining, and we look forward to seeing where you fit into the ASMBS family tree. And then this year is going to be very unique. We're going to want you to take advantage of every opportunity you can to go to invited courses for fellows, and you're going to meet your class, if you will. And this is a very important part of the fellowship that you can't put a dollar value to, because when here I am 20 some years later from my fellowship, but For instance, when I get asked to be the guest editor, as Adrian Dan did for this, who do I go to? I go to all of my class, if you will, all of my colleagues that went out and joined programs or started programs as well. And you can see from the list here, all of the former fellows and colleagues of mine in the country it's easy to pick up the phone and say, hey, would you be willing to write a chapter? Of course, now they're training fellows. You co-write this often with one of your current fellows as well. So it's a great way to sort of pass it on, if you will, your legacy and contributions to the literature, and really help to distinguish the next generation, which right now is those of you listening. One other thing, looking back now on my career, I'd say is the other thing advice I'd say is take pictures. And you have no idea the power of these pictures many years later when you reflect back on them. And so that's stapler's not being handed to me upside down. I actually still fire it like that. It's more ergonomic for my shoulder. And so, but who would have thought then, reflecting back, first of all, the individual who took these pictures, stock photos in the operating room when I was a fellow 22 years ago at MCV, now VCU, is still there. And that's his job, is he still takes photos. It's amazing to know that. But who would have thought that in this photo taken would have, by 20 years later plus, would have had 3 future presidents of ASMBS in this one photo in the same OR at that time. Of course, myself, Eric DeMaria, and the late Harvey Sugarman. So pretty cool to reflect back on your career from these photos and see who trained you and how proud you are of your lineage. Of course, he trained many of us. He was open, and so did a lot of open surgery. So he would actually have us as the fellows walk him through the operations. And he did pick up laparoscopic surgery and was able to safely do gastric bypass. And he actually, before his passing, has a lecture on basically how to train an older person, not in this, who didn't do fellowship, how to do laparoscopic bariatric surgery safely. And so this is another great thing that you will get, tangible benefit, is years of mentorship that lasts beyond your year. I still reach out to Eric DeMaria. We talk frequently. We've gone on trips together and vacations together. And 2 weeks don't go by where I don't get a text from one of my former fellows asking a complicated question or advice on their career. And so we hope that you maintain those types of relationships as well with your fellowship directors. And of course, we want you to come to ASMBS, both our fall weekend meeting and our annual meeting. So we're back on cycle. Hope really COVID is behind us to the point that we can continue to have in-person meetings, even though it probably isn't ever going to going away completely. But now if it's hopefully manageable to the point where we will always have a weekend fall meeting, and we always have our big annual meeting, scientific one, which is in June. So the fall meeting is typically October, November, and then we'll always have our June big scientific meeting as well. We'd encourage you to attend both if possible. These are really amazing events that are jam-packed with important events ranging from, like we said, the walks from obesity to the ASMBS Foundation, which is our vehicle for raising money for not only through the walks, but also we do our LEAD Awards, where we recognize all of our respected thought leaders in our specialty. Then there's the obesity PAC, which is the political action side, where we donate dollars. Those are not tax deductible like the foundation is, as no political offerings are. But it's important to stay engaged at that level, because there's a lot of things that in our specialty that you don't have to deal with in other aspects of subspecialty or general surgery, which is fighting for coverage for your patients. We don't have to fight for hernia coverage. We don't have to fight for cholecystectomy coverage, but we have to fight for metabolic and bariatric surgery coverage for our patients. Another important part of our program is MBSA QIP, stands for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery Accreditation and Quality Improvement Program. This is a partnership between ASMBS and the American College of Surgeons. Many of you are probably from your residency familiar with NSQIP. You might even be familiar with TQIP, which is the Trauma Quality Improvement Program. But we have MBSA QIP. now for bariatric surgery. And believe it or not, I think there's over now 900 accredited MBSA QIP programs in the country. This is far more than we have of NSQIP, and NSQIP's been around far longer than our program. And this is actually one of the true benefits that came out of the VA program. It's modeled off of the VA quality databases in the country. And so to be at an accredited center, you have to be, have a variety of pieces of the puzzle in place. This is a 98-page booklet that has what it takes to be an accredited program. And all of us on the call here as your faculty work in these accredited programs and have established these standards, if you will. And it's a true reflection of where our society has come. When you think about the mortality rate was 3% in the 80s for bariatric surgery. And now it's gone from 3% to 0.3% to now 0.017%. I mean, it's got the safety profile of a cholecystectomy or appendectomy. So pretty amazing to think where the movement on the needle. And the American College of Surgeons leadership has recognized this. They have never seen a quality improvement program within 3 decades get improved so dramatically as ours. And so this has been recognized by the American College of Surgeons and the leadership, and they have taken what we have done within our society and made this the new sort of model, if you will, of process improvement for surgery. Within this website is a lot of useful information, one of which is the risk benefit calculator. So you can literally just type in the patient's height, weight, it'll calculate the BMI, you put the ethnicity in, put in the gender, and then if they have any of these other comorbid conditions, and then you hit compute results. So I typed one in just for an example here to show you, and then you can put the 4 different operations up there, and it'll show you the weight loss curves, it'll show you the reductions in comorbidity, and it'll even show you the complication rates based on a database of several 100,000 patients. So this is very exciting. It's not just something you should hang your hat on completely, but it can be an adjunct tool to you while you're in clinic with maybe some of the higher risk patients to help with selection of criteria for patients. One other thing we're going to, of course, want you to do is join a committee. Now, when you start out, we had over 80 people join committees just this past year, which was pretty amazing, those that were listed here. But as fellows, you're not going to probably be put on the program committee and write out a training, but we could really use your help on things. But you have to have a proven track record in publication and leadership to get on things like program committee and the clinical issues committee, which write our guideline papers. But we could desperately use your kind of talent around things like public education and on communications committee. I was late to the game on social media, so I don't know what Instagram is. I figured out Facebook, and I figured out Twitter, and I only did that because we started having our our journal clubs for ASMBS on those. So that's when I had to learn about them. So, but your generation kind of grew up on this stuff, and this is untapped potential. So we could really use your help on things like communications committee, so that we need to get creative about getting our messaging out, not only to our members, but to prospective patients as well. So we'd encourage you to get plugged in. We have over 20 committees that meet, through Zoom chats as well as in person at our weekend and annual meetings as well. Some I just want to highlight specifically. We're not going to take time to do all of them, but of course, one that directly impacts you is our Bariatric Surgery Training Committee, the BST. And this was, of course, led by Matt Martin and, of course, our own Adrian Dan. A very active committee. Many things that they've done in the last few years to help us, which is first and foremost navigating us through COVID when the volumes began to drop, and creating some pathways to certification while fellows were getting their experience potentially impacted by the COVID shutdowns. And of course, this landmark webinar for the fellows as well, which is pretty exciting to see that you now have this kind of rich content by experts in our field to rely upon and then take back and discuss with your fellowship directors and co-directors and other faculty upon completion of these modules. And then just to let you know again, I have the privilege of being the future president of the Fellowship Council in 16 months, but every specialty, the specialty societies are in the certification business. So this committee has laid out what it takes for you to have been an ASMBS certified fellow. Did you meet the criteria? At the Fellowship Council level, we're in the accreditation business. So we accredit programs. The specialty societies set the bar for certification of fellows. And so we don't mess with that. So we don't tell the, compatibility society what the criteria needs to be. They set that criteria. We come in and make sure that their fellowship is accredited because they have all of the pieces of the puzzles in place, but we don't set the granular level of what it takes. They're the content experts on that. And here, the content experts is our bariatric surgery training committee, and we rely on them for those types of decision-making rights. Of course, access to care. Like I had mentioned, this is still the last acceptable form of discrimination in our country is against patients with the disease of obesity. And so we have to fight hard for this. This is our current leadership of that. It's probably the largest committee. I think it's got over 75, maybe even 100 people on this call every month. And so there's just so much going on around, the different plans. And now OAGB and SAVI, and now maybe even ESG, as we know, has recently been FDA approved endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty. So we'll be working on that. And this is where you at the front lines need to be. And we have toolkits, we can give you tips and tricks on how to deal with your insurance payers, because you will be having to do peer-to-peer phone calls. And we want you to have the upper hand when you deal with these individuals who are trying to put up barriers to access to care. I've done this, and I have no special, whatever you call it, training or background, but I'm just an advocate for our patients. So, I've bottom right, I've met with the governor when I lived in Wisconsin about these issues. Congressman Ron Kind was a big supporter of the Treat and Reduce Obesity Act, which still has not passed. And so we have, on behalf of ASMBS, we do give to both sides of the aisle. But if it's can be favorable to our cause, then we support those individuals. So we would, give him Congressman Ron Kind checks to help lobby for things that were important. Have the privilege of being on a think tank with Newt Gingrich around healthcare reform as well. And you will have these opportunities as well with it wherever you go. And more recently, now that I've moved to South Carolina, we met with Congresswoman Nancy Mace and had dinner because now it took us all 19 years for us to flip coverage and get state employee coverage in Wisconsin, which we finally did in 2019. And then I moved to South Carolina, to one of the other 4 states that doesn't now have coverage for state employees. So we're still pushing to get that changed. We work in concert with our industry partners, as well as fellow folks within the state. So as you can see, Dr. Ronna Pullitt here at dinner, he's 3 hours down the road. I do not see him as competition. I see him as an ally. And so a great individual, very gifted. And so this is the time to come together unified when you meet with your local politicians about some of these coverage policies. Another really important committee was the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, led by our leaders here, Farah Hussein, Monique Hassan, and Pearl Ma, has done a great job specifically around the mentor-mentee program. This is something I was passionate about. I wanted to start during this past year, but with everything else I had on my plate, I'm just thrilled that the D&I committee ran with this. So we actually have a mentor-mentee program where you fill out an application. They'll try and match you up based again on background and type of practice. where you're doing your fellowship things or where you plan on ending up. And so the goal is to meet, by phone or by Zoom, and then of course in person at our annual meeting. I got to meet the person, my mentee. She's in more of a rural practice in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and she has some very unique challenges. And so we had some opportunities to kind of process that and walk through her and give her some tips and tricks. I may even have her group come and look at our program here to give her some ammunition to go back to her administration with. And so we'd encourage you this next year to apply for this so you can get hooked up with a mentor as well. In the time we have remaining, let's talk about some of the impact initiatives. This is just something that, again, not being a strong social media presence myself, I wanted something else for our membership that was unique. So we do have a Twitter account, which I'd encourage you to follow. We do have a closed Facebook group, so I'd encourage you to be on that. But I wanted one that was vetted, curated, had a board, and was a little bit more HIPAA compliant. And so we now have this program called the Doc Matter. And I'd encourage you to become a candidate member so that you can have access to this. And you can just put a challenging clinical scenario out. You can put the upper GI, you can put the endoscopy pictures, and you can just say, what would you do? And I've used this in my own clinical practice. And I put out 5 different operations I could do in a unique situation. And based on everyone's feedback around the world, from thought leaders, the one that bubbled to the top is what I did for my patients. So this is really exciting to be able to have this. I encourage you to use this as well going forward and to get an account. We've had, even this is a few months ago, so it's been even more than that, but a lot of different discussions. And when you think about, you can do this by email, you can do it by off your laptop, and you can do it off of the app on your phone. So a lot of different ways to engage depending on how you prefer. If you like to see it by email and see the response on email, it'll come to your inbox. If you prefer just to get on the app on your phone and see what the new discussions are on those threads, there's some really rich content there. And so I'd encourage you to take advantage of this. And like I said, here's just me reaching out with a question and getting a lot of real-time feedback can really help you with your clinical practice. And then as we begin to close up, one of the things is really important is the recognition by the American Board of Surgery of our specialty. I mean, it took 50 years of our specialty to basically be recognized by the American Board of Surgery. As you know, there's no subspecialty boards that you could sit for in metabolic and bariatric surgery, but now there is. It's called Focused Practice Designation, so FPD. Now, this has been around a while, and there are some other specialties in medicine fields and surgical fields that have this FPD designation. What it is what distinguishes it is, even though all of you are doing fellowships, which is awesome, is you don't necessarily have to do a fellowship in this specialty. You can gain practice in your own, once you're in practice, and begin to niche out and become a little focused expert in this area. Obviously now, most of us are fellowship trained, but there is not everybody. So like, for instance, geriatric medicine, pain medicine have these sort of other areas where people have tailored their practice and become experts in them. And we now have this for surgery. Now, this was a long time coming. Some of the people who deserve credit are listed on this slide. So we had sort of an academic and private practice balance between Eric P. Marie and Jaime Ponce leading this charge. But to go from vision to reality within a year and have to go from item writing group led by Rich Peterson to an actual tangible exam within less than a year was pretty amazing feat. I honestly didn't think it could be done, but it was. And so many of us sat for that first exam. And fortunately, we had a very high pass rate. So it was, I was a little nervous to think that your president might fail the exam. Fortunately, I did not. But this is not going to be something offered every year, but probably every other year moving forward. Now, how does this impact you as the fellows? Because this is something that you have to be 3 years into practice before you can sit for this exam. But if you do your fellowship, that counts as your first year. So 2 years into your clinical practice, you'll be able to sit for this FPD exam, and we definitely want you to do this. We want patients looking for their FPD approved surgeon or designated surgeons, including those at their accredited MBSA QIP centers moving forward. What else? Well, we obviously have a pathway for procedures. I mean, this can be very political, very between what do we endorse and not endorse as ASMBS leadership, but you as members have a say in this, because whether it's a guideline or a position statement or a new procedure, it eventually goes to you for member comment, for public comment, much like our Congress does when they put something out that's going to be a change at CMS level, for instance. There's a public comment period. You have a member comment period as well. And this is just briefly the steps that it goes through. It's very arduous to get to where we're at. Basically, what you see on this slide is what is currently the endorsed metabolic bariatric procedures. And obviously, your job over the course of the year, as you learn some, if not all of these, is to be able to match the right patient to the right procedure. Obviously, the more powerful the metabolic effect that it has on the body, that obviously comes at a price with increased complications and nutritional deficiencies, much like I shared on that risk calculator. And so, but this is where we're at currently. This could change in the future, but you as a fellow and future member of ASMBS will have input on that. Obviously, you can see here where the sleeve gastrectomy continues to dominate currently in the US, with gastric bypass, the number 2. And then, of course, you can see where revisions, and we're still in our infancy on some of these other procedures. Just another way of looking at it, these are literally hot off the press. Our task force that estimates the numbers of these various procedures. Again, BST doesn't change the bar for anastomotic procedures. They continue to hold the line on that, and I respect them for that. So for you that get your 50 anastomotic procedures, you meet your accreditation, or I should say numbers for certification in that venue, but not everybody will, because you might be in programs that are still very sleeve dominant. But we're hopefully you're going to look for that balance, and then how things might change with the OAGB coming online to be determined as well. At the end of the day, though, like I mentioned, your generation is going to have much more rich research into this area of what I call metabolically matching the right patient to the right procedure. I look forward to your contributions in the years to come. And finally, again, I think we've done an amazing job. When I applied, there was no fellowship council, there was no match. It was just a phone call and a handshake, and you showed up. So when you think where we've come over the last 2 decades, it's amazing in terms of now we have accreditation of programs, we have certification of fellows, and we have validation of our specialty now by this focused practice designation exam. One area I thought, though, that, and we have rich educational content, which hopefully you're getting right now, and we'll continue on these webinars over the course of this year. But one area where I thought was still an opportunity and a gap for you as future leaders is in leadership development. And you have no idea what this piece of paper is going to distinguish you within your operating room, within your health system, within your community. You are going to be looked up to significantly. And so I developed this idea of the ASMBS Leadership Academy, and I'm so thankful that the Executive Council was supportive of this initiative. And so this is something that will take place for your class this fall at our at the San Antonio meeting. And so we bring in various speakers, and it's all about leadership development. And we have topics ranging from dealing with a challenging personality to, you know, all of the different things around leadership and what your styles of leadership are, and how you process things and things like that. And I'm still learning. Like I said, I've never wanted to be the president of anything. I'm privileged of being the president of 4 different kind of major societies, if you will, but I have always aspired to be a better leader. So I read books, I go to courses on it, but I wanted our own curriculum developed on this. And so dealing with adverse outcomes, you can see we have a variety of amazing gifted speakers speak on this topic. And I was thrilled because it was also a non-CME event. So we could blend the industry partners with this. So you will, hear a talk, and then, one of our industry partners will get up and show you cutting edge technology and share with you what's coming down the pike. And then we'll go back into another leadership talk. And we do this over the course of over the 2 days. It's dovetailed prior to the fall meeting. This was the content in our sponsors as well. You can see the fellows down there. And this was a covered event. We cover the cost of this for you, fly you in. But as you can see, you have to attend every session to get reimbursed for it. By golly, they stayed to the bitter end, every one of those fellows. We want this to be a legacy level event. So it ends with a reception. And we want to invite back last year's fellows. That'll be a year into practice now to talk to you and see how they applied some of these principles as well. And look forward to seeing what that does for you in your career. So sign up early when you get the invitation, because last year we only limited this to 50 folks. And we want you to be one of those 50 to be part of this unique opportunity. So again, who would have thought, when I graduated from my fellowship in 2001 from the Medical College of Virginia, now VCU, I had a chance to return to my roots last year. I was going to say, I use this in my presidential address, but much like that statue behind me, I'm a little more battered and bruised and war-torn, but I am just thrilled to know what that year did for my career. I'm very blessed to be able to be where I am in life and within the society, and to be able to share with you today. So I think it's important for you to already start thinking about what is your legacy, because it starts now. You are setting the foundation for where you go out and what you're going to do to be able to think 20 years from now that the foundation and roots were laid now. I mean, just having the privilege to speak to you today, my presidential address was entitled "My Heart is Full," and I can tell you, after talking to you about where you're headed over the course of this next year, I can tell you that my heart is still full. And like I said, some of you are going to be the leaders of our future society. And I look forward to seeing the future presidents. And hopefully someday you'll look back and say it started when Dr. Kothari did the inaugural fellowship webinar for my year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kothari, for that excellent recap and review of the myriad of things that are changing in bariatric surgery and the status of our discipline. Unlike that statue, I think you look better today. 2001. You've aged very well, handling your stress levels and everything that goes on with being a busy surgeon and a leader. I also want to thank you for the exemplary leadership that you have shown in so many facets of our profession beyond the presidency. You are a genuine role model, not just for your fellows. We could see why your fellowship's been so successful and thriving, but also for all the membership of the ASMBS, many of which wish to follow in your footsteps and contribute to the degree that you have. We'll move on to some of the questions now. 1991 was a big year for bariatric surgery at the time. But since 1991, I looked up a few things just before we started here. That year was the first step in the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Gallon of gas was $1.12, and Iraq invaded Kuwait. So that's how far back we're going. But in 1991, there was a second consensus conference on the guidelines for indications for bariatric surgery at the time. And as we all know, over the last 30 years, the avalanche of research and evidence to support not only metabolic and bariatric surgery, but the changes in procedures, the advent of laparoscopy, and so many other things have changed what we do. Yet many insurance companies and third-party payers are very happy to act as if those guidelines and indications are set in stone. So I know that's a big initiative that you've been heading up, and I was wondering if you could comment a little bit about that.
Yeah, great, very kind. Thank you for those kind comments, by the way, Adrian, and important topic. Yeah, 1991, other than my freshman year of college, and I remember the invasion, and hard to believe. I didn't know that it was that year. I looked up too, the World Wide Web rolled out that year too. Hard to know what internet was, but hard to know. But no other society quotes a 31-year-old document as their guidelines. I mean, can you imagine the Cardiology Society using 31-year-old guidelines? Can you imagine the stroke, us using stroke guidelines from 31 years ago before things like stents and clot busters and things like this even existed? No, we're trapped in the past. And so the fellows may not know that the National Institutes of Health, they no longer are in the consensus guideline business. They've gotten out of it. They're too busy doing other things. So we're trapped in the past. So it's time to update it, and we have. And it's been, again, hopefully a legacy level event, because I charged the ASMBS Executive Council with we have to update this. And other past presidents have tried and failed. They said, why do you think yours is going to be different? I said, because it's grassroots effort. It's going to be up to every local ASMBS member when they talk with their local plans or national plans or politicians, or on peer review, or when they publish, not to quote the 1991 guidelines anymore. And so we have written this new document, and I'm pleased to tell you that the ASMBS leadership has endorsed it, as well as IFSO leadership has endorsed it. And so the official title will be the ASMBS IFSO Updated Guidelines on Indications for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery 2022. It will be forthcoming. We'll probably get a big splash and rollout at IFSO, which happens to be in Miami. So our international meeting will be there, and it'll be soon available online and soon available in print this fall. And so a day will come when those of us who are publishing, much like yourselves, that contribute significantly to literature and Kunoor and others, you'll be required to say in the methods, all of our patients met the ASMBS IFSO guidelines, and reference that, and abolish that. Your paper won't get accepted. So I think this is how we're going to turn the tide. People keep saying, how's this going to work compared to that? I said, grassroots. How do you get presidents in the White House? It starts usually in a cafe in Iowa, shaking hands, and suddenly somebody reaches that level. That's what we have to replicate. And hopefully this document, which is forthcoming in the next couple of months, will help do that.
So am I understanding correctly that for future research manuscripts, posters, anything our fellows may be involved in, we've had buy-in from the editors of SWORD and Obesity Medicine, Dr. Rosenthal, Dr. Shkora, that the 1991 guidelines are no longer to be referenced?
That is correct. There will be, of course, a kind of a ramp-up phase or a washout phase, if you will, where your study from a year ago or whatever obviously fell under that. But a day will come then for moving forward, where a day would come where if you reference that will not be allowed. I mean, it would be you need to be the checklist for acceptance into either of our major two journals. And I have agreements from both, like you said, Raul Rosenthal and Scott Shakora, that will be the case moving forward at some point.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Kothari, for this wonderful initiative and your work on that. And I think just to let our fellows know, the reason that these have to be changed is because they no longer match, they no longer are in line with the evidence that we have for the benefits of metabolic and bariatric surgery and the safety, as you mentioned. Kunoor, you have a question?
Let me unmute myself first. There is a question in the chat. Dr. Kate Varney is asking, although there is the IH division of ASMBS for other team members, has there been any progress toward creation of a committee for the non-surgeon physicians, ABOM obesity medicine physicians, and or MBSA QIP obesity medicine directors or medical directors? Yeah,
great question. And the answer is yes. A few years ago, the board executive council did approve to create a non-surgeon physician category within ASMBS. So yes, they are welcome. And we know that this space can also be collaborative. We know that we have gastroenterologists that are in the space around balloons and endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty. And so we want that to be done collaboratively in a multidisciplinary fashion. So we'd rather embrace them and have them do it in the same model that we do, rather than kind of going rogue, if you will, off by themselves, doing this, but not doing it in a multidisciplinary fashion. So yes, that category does exist.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's actually a lovely transition. At some point during the year, we are going to have a talk on non-surgical options for the treatment of obesity. So these are definitely a vital part of ASMBS and kind of the work that we do.
Yeah, and pharma is really emerging. I mean, some of these pharmaceutical interventions are very powerful. I mean, they're hitting some benchmarks that are very similar, close to some of our metabolic surgery interventions. And so, of course, there's some significant costs with that. And then, so like, where is it going to work like as an adjuvant therapy? Like you do surgery and then you plateau, and then is that the time to start pharma in maintenance mode, or is it at pre-surgery or afterwards? I mean, I'd love to see some of the folks on this call do some research. And what we've never been able to do is sort of the poor responder or the non-responder or partial responder. I mean, can we predict success? I mean, can we use some of these GLP-1 analogs? And if you don't lose weight with those, like maybe that means you wouldn't lose weight with surgery. We don't know this yet. Or, if you did, like you should do good with a gastric bypass that increases GLP-1 or something like that. This is where I think some great research can come in the future.
Awesome.
So I'll go on next here with another question. I know we have another one from the chat, but along the same lines, the medical therapy is getting better, it's improving, but so is surgery, and we have continuously improved over the past decades. If there's one thing about metabolic and bariatric surgery it's that over 70 years it has continuously changed, and chances are, Dr. Kothari, that many of our fellows will be doing different procedures 20, 30 years from now, no different than you and I are from our fellowship days. Can you speak a little bit about the SADI procedure and the OAGB2 procedures that have recently become endorsed by our society?
Yes. And so both, just to let them know from historical interest, because probably they were still in medical school when both these procedures came forward through ASMBS to be endorsed, and were not. Okay, so it's not a rubber stamp. Things have come through and were not endorsed and embraced by ASMBS and never made it onto our list of endorsed procedures. Both of those went through and failed in the past, and more recently came through and passed. So we can be, myself included, open to the evidence. And so SADI failed the first time because was this a completely independent operation in and of itself with unique metabolic traits that we needed to study further, or was it just a major modification of a known operation, the duodenal switch? And that was the fundamental argument. Is this just taking out the roux on a DS, or is this a new operation? And at the time, the literature was not mature enough that we couldn't tell the difference. So we felt it was a new operation that needed more study. Well, we have more papers on it. We've looked at that. And of course, I think our fear was, a leak any leak can be devastating. We know that when it goes undetected, particularly so-called failure to rescue. But at least on a roux limb, there's no bile typically, so with a SADI, there's bile, and we know that leak from a bile leak has increased morbidity and mortality associated with it. So there's a safety profile to it, a safe rollout that we need to do in our country as well. And so it's interesting because it's endorsed, but we haven't seen that huge uptick, probably again because we're fighting the payers for it, which we continue to do behind the scenes. And I think North Carolina's had some wins around SADI recently as well in terms of coverage. One, anastomosis gastric bypass, OAGB, similar sort of concept. Like we knew from the loop gastric bypass, the original gastric bypass, if you will, back in the day, when some of that original rat studies showed that duodenal gastric reflux increased risk of cancer at the GE junction. That was the end of that procedure back then. But if you go back and look at the literature, it's anywhere from 18 to 25 years later that increased risk takes place. So when OAGB took off, particularly around the world, but not so much in the US, there was caution around it because we didn't want putting our patients at increased risk of malignancy. We also know that, the theme of my meeting this last year was obesity cancer prevention. So we also know there are 13 cancers that obesity is the #1 risk factor for. We know patients live longer after metabolic and bariatric surgery because they have less cancers and they have less cardiac events. So where's that balance? Again, now there's more literature around it. Now we've seen that literature mature and we see how few those really are. So the benefits to the patient, overall health, quality of life, reduction in these things compared to maybe a slightly increased risk that's maybe 20 years down the road. And if they can be in a surveillance program, it tipped the scales in favor of OAGB. I think the area we still have to worry about, though, one is safe rollout of it, where it acts as a revisional procedure following perhaps weight regain after sleeve. And then, honestly, is the limb lengths. And that's where I think is still an area of debate and something that we're going to have to study and keep an eye on, because the protein calorie malnutrition can be very real in that operation.
Very well said. One more question I think we have time for, and this is a question that's coming from Dr. Lena Ketan and is a fantastic one. Do you have any suggestions for the job search? What resources does ASMBS have other than the job board and the mentor-mentee program? I think this is really a great question. I sit down with my 3 fellows at the beginning of every year and I say, what kind of job do you want? And of course they look at me with very large eyes and say, I don't know, but I think, you know, they really do need to start thinking about it. And yeah, what advice do you have?
Oh, that's a great question from a great friend of mine. So I would say it's you know, this came up. Now I'm going to switch and wear my fellowship council hat. This came up last year at our retreat as well, and I was charged with this topic because the question that was posed to us is, are we training too many fellows for the market? And I started doing research, and I have to give credit to a nurse that I work with in my office who began looking into this. And I said, just go online and start finding all these websites for where they're looking for jobs. And believe it or not, she found almost 200 bariatric surgery positions open in the country that were either bariatric or bariatric / general surgery. And so when I presented it to that board, spun it and said, maybe we're not training enough. I mean, a couple things to think about. One, we're penetrating what 1% of the patient eligible patient population are getting it. Even if we move that to 2%, which is our goal, that doubles the volume from 225,000 procedures to over 500,000. You could argue even if we made that penetrance, there's not enough of us doing high quality surgery. Second, though, is, do you want to go where the jobs are versus are you wanting to go where some super desirable place you want to live? Then yeah, things are going to be a little bit more limited. We don't have a bariatric surgeon or a doctor shortage in this country. We don't have a shortage. We have a distribution problem. And same thing with our specialty. If you're going to be one in a desirable location where Miami, Seattle, whatever, Chicago, the penetrance might be hard to find a job perhaps, but there are jobs out there where you can go out and really make an impact on your community and make a difference. And so I would encourage you to go where the jobs are. And then to your point, when I was program committee chair, and Lena, maybe I should do that again this year, which is I need a job, I need a partner mixer at the end of the session. And so where people can stay afterwards and kind of speed date, if you will, and start looking at these opportunities. And maybe we take advantage of that at the Leadership Academy, where it ends at the reception is where we maybe invite those of us who are looking for partners or looking for expansion or have somebody retiring, and where we can meet them face to face and do some networking and exchanging of contact information as well. And then we have our own website as well to look for that. So that's a great question, great opportunities. I think that we can expand on that to kind of help this class as well.
And it is nice at the end of COVID, or not the end, but the resumption of in-person activities in the face of COVID. I think that's one of the biggest things is networking, reaching out and actually people meeting people. You and I, we have 6 degrees of VCU versus with other people degrees of Duke, and just all those networks and those in-person contacts I think are really important. So for the fellows, ask your mentors, your fellowship directors to put you in touch with other people and get the word out and start looking. Also, start looking as a fellow, start looking for the type of job that you want to have so that we can better help you. I think that brings us to the end of our hour. Dr. Kothari, thank you so much for joining us. I think this has been a fantastic session. Great overview for the fellows. Adrian, thank you as well. And we look forward to the West Coast session.
Thank you. Thank you both for all that you do.
Oh, that was such an excellent talk. Thank you so much, Dr. Kothari, for taking the time to chat with us today and to do that wonderful presentation from this morning. I really enjoyed you recapping all of the benefits of ASMBS. I will tell you that as a junior surgeon, I really have come to take advantage of some of the networking and mentorship opportunities. I think have been really great. And especially now as a member of the BST, I think there are all these educational resources available to not just fellows, but to surgeons as well. So I'm really grateful to ASMBS and to all of the leadership for helping us with this. I guess I would like to start off with a more general question. So you kind of went through some of the things that ASMBS is doing now. What do you think is the future of bariatric surgery? And, specifically, how does ASMBS play a role in that?
Yeah, great question. First of all, I do want to thank you for your contributions, not only to the BST, but to your to ASMBS in general. It's great to hear and get more engaged younger members like yourselves. You're the lifeblood of our society, and I thank you for your contributions. I think something we're going to have to work really hard at over the next couple of years, and I do think our current president, Dr. Lemasters, feels this way, is one is multimodality therapy. Like, we can't be afraid of medications moving forward. Some of them are very powerful, but like I said, there's a cost involved with those. With surgery, there's an upfront cost that's amortized over the next couple of years over the benefits to the patient as their reduction in diabetes and hypertension and diabetes and things start to go away. We see the reduction in those pharmacy costs. If we do just pharmaceutical therapy, there's a constant pharmaceutical cost. So I think we need to embrace it, but we also need to study it and be able to work collaboratively with our medical colleagues around that. I think another thing I'd like to really think we need to push for, because clearly larger pharmaceutical companies see the benefit of this, is direct to consumer marketing. So we have we see these other drugs that get put on television marketing, talk to your doctor about this anticoagulant and things like that. We need to empower our own future patients with information. And I do think we need a powerful direct-to-consumer marketing campaign that empowers patients to take control of their own health and their own decision-making and come in very informed to a seminar, rather than primary care or somebody else who's showing some implicit bias to these patients and not allowing them to be referred. So I think that's the direction we need to go. And that would be an expensive initiative, but I do think it would be powerful if we worked together with pharmaceutical, endoscopic companies, surgical companies, our advocacy societies, and with ASMBS, under the umbrella of ASMBS. I think it would be a powerful message to the country and to prospective patients, and empower them to begin exploring other options other than traditional diet and exercise, which we know for this population doesn't work very well.
Yeah, I think that's great. Actually, that was going to be my second question to you, because I think one of the problems that we are encountering, or I guess I shouldn't say problem, but the challenges in the field, is that, most of our patients don't have access to care. So I was curious to hear how you thought that we could improve that. Right now, I think probably still less than 2% of patients are getting bariatric surgery when they're eligible.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will have, hopefully forthcoming in the next several months, another publication that we hope to get a lot of lay press out of and mileage out of. And that's the National Opinion Research Council out of the University of Chicago. So we did a study over 5 years ago looking at prospective patients' perceptions of the disease of obesity. And they considered the disease of obesity as serious as cancer. We had an opportunity in sort of COVID pandemic model to re-explore these and see if the public perception has changed. These are very powerful 1,700 patient evaluations, highly reputable company, and very statistically sound. And we've repeated that, and we have found that not only do patients continue to see the disease of obesity and take it as and measure it as serious as cancer, but we have seen an increase in Hispanics and African Americans specifically who have begun exploring for the first time ever other weight loss options, including pharmaceutical intervention and weight loss surgery for the first time. My theory behind that is, which translates roughly into about 6 million folks, or between 6 and 7 million, for the first time ever started to explore this idea that didn't pre-COVID. Of course, my theory behind that is these are the folks that are disproportionately affected by hypertension, diabetes, and lack of access. And so we also know that these are the comorbidity factors that put you at increased risk for an adverse outcome from COVID. So I think society this was a wake-up call, to see that obesity this isn't a condition of volition where it's my personal choice that I'm living this way, that this is a disease and it needs to be taken seriously. And so I'm very excited when that publication comes out, and that the amount of lay press that we hope to get out of that as well.
I don't know if you wanted to ask something, Adrian. I do have one more question.
Sure. So I'd like to discuss again a topic that I think we had a lot of good dialogue over this morning, that Dr. Shanu Kothari elaborated very nicely on the need to change what we consider are the indications and the guidelines for indications for metabolic and bariatric surgery. And I'll preface that by reminding everybody just how different things were in 1991 in our specialty. We've come so far. We understand things so much better. The avalanche of literature that's elucidated the disease of obesity and the improvements in laparoscopic and robotic surgery. So with that being said, Dr. Kothari, there's a push, an initiative to change the utilization of those outdated guidelines that insurance companies are very happy to keep using, right?
Absolutely. So, important question. Thanks for sharing that, Adrian. And I can think of no other medical or surgical society that's trapped in a 31-year-old document. We don't use 31-year-old cardiology guidelines. We don't use 31-year-old oncology guidelines. We don't use 31-year-old stroke care guidelines. But we are trapped in the past with this. And for the fellows who may or may not know this, the National Institutes of Health has gotten out of the consensus guideline business. So there will never be another one from the NIH. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trapped in the past with this. And so we've taken this initiative. It's something I put to the Executive Council of ASMBS at my retreat last fall, and was excited to see that they approved the project. We had item writing groups. We did it in collaboration with our IFSO colleagues, our international colleagues, and we do have an updated guideline that will be forthcoming probably in print version in October, but in electronic version prior to that, on the ASMBS IFSO updated indications for metabolic and bariatric surgery 2022. Now, this will take a grassroots efforts from everybody on this call to make this change, meaning when you get out into practice and do your peer-to-peers, they're going to say, oh, BMI 40 with no comorbidities and BMI 30 to 35 with 2 comorbidities, and you're going to say, that's a 31-year-old document. We no longer endorse that. This is the ASMBS updated guidelines. And my patient with BMI 32 with type 2 diabetes qualifies for metabolic surgery. And then counter them and say, do you use a 31-year-old guideline for anything else in your coverage policy with its Blue Cross or Aetna or Cigna? So it's going to take a grassroots effort. And then also moving forward, eventually a day will come when you publish either in SWORD or obesity surgery, you can't reference the 1991 guidelines. You will have to update or reference the 2022 guidelines, or the manuscript will be rejected. This is how we begin to make change at a grassroots level and slowly turn the tide, specifically with the payers around these non-evidence-based, contemporary guidelines. Even if we can move the needle on the BMI 30 to 35 for type 2 diabetics and the lower BMI units for our Asian population, by 2 to 2.5 BMI points lower, that's a huge win. That's a huge win. And that's millions of patients now that suddenly qualify that didn't before under those antiquated guidelines.
Thank you. That points out and highlights some of the great work that's done in our society and on behalf of our members and patients. In addition to that, one of the constants about bariatric surgery is that through its 70-year course, it's been ever changing, which is the strange thing. It's constant, that it's always changing. And you and I, Shanu, are not doing the surgeries that we were trained to do. Those have evolved. Some of them have gone away. Some of them have evolved in the way that we do perform them. And there are new ones. So a little bit about the SADI, a little bit about the OAGB, two newer operations. You've talked a little bit about the work that it's taken to get them to the point that they are endorsed by the society, but a little bit for our fellows, where do you think those lie in the future of their careers?
Yeah, well, I hope that they either get training in them during their fellowship, and if they don't, that they safely roll them out with their newly advanced skill sets through ASMBS courses and other venues. The SADI is, it took a while to get endorsed. And earlier, when it didn't pass through the ASMBS, the question was, is this a major modification of a current procedure, or is this a completely new procedure? And so now there's a little bit more corpus of literature around that. We felt that it really was a modification, the loop versus the RU to the DS. And so it ultimately passed. Now we have to get some payers to come into line as well. And that may be, even though it's ASMBS endorsed, we still aren't getting a lot of coverage. We're seeing some wins in North Carolina and some other places where SADI is now covered. So looking forward to hopefully that growth curve around SADI. OAGB, again, the concern was around its potential for malignancy at the GE junction. That was the pause. The more we've looked at the literature, the risk is more in the 15 to 20 year range for that. But we also know the powerful metabolic benefits of surgery, including my presidential theme was prevention of cancer. We know 13 cancers where obesity or overweight is the #1 risk factor. So we know we're lowering the risk for overall cancers, maybe a slightly increased risk for OAGB. And then the other thing that tipped the scales for me, honestly, was when semaglutide, when one of these powerful anti-obesity medications was FDA approved, and it's got a warning that this causes cancer, thyroid cancer in rats. Patients with MEN or thyroid, history of cancer should not have that pharmaceutical intervention, and they can't keep that drug on the shelves fast enough with these known risks. And so I think it just comes down to informed consent, a balanced discussion with the patient, maybe not the right operation for somebody who's very young, but age 50 and above. When you start balancing the benefits versus the risks, a slightly increased risk of malignancy 20 years later, that's where I think my vote switched, and now OAGB is approved by ASMBS. And of course, we're looking forward to safe rollout of that within the US here shortly.
Great. Well, thank you for that wonderful answer. I'm going to pass it back to Julianne, see if there's any additional comments.
Yeah, so actually we do have some questions from the audience. Dr. Abu Hana is asking whether you believe that, or if you think surgeons have a role in endoscopic bariatric procedures, or should it really be going through GI? And then if that's the case, that we should be more involved, how do we incorporate it into the requirements and training of the fellows?
Excellent question. A great question. The short answer is yes. We as surgeons should have the seat at the table, should be getting training in this. We know that there are many more surgeons, particularly in underserved areas, than there are gastroenterologists. And the key is to work collaboratively with this. You may or may not be aware that the MERIT trial was recently published in Lancet, a journal very prestigious with an extremely high impact factor, showing the powerful metabolic effects of the ESG. So now the question is, again, training and safe rollout of this. There will be gastroenterologists who embrace this. What we don't endorse is sort of the do it and abandon the patient. We know the powerful impact that a multidisciplinary care of these patients is, working in tandem with our nutritionists, our psychologists, social workers, et cetera, to get that, to maximize outcome. And so that's the same thing that we can do. And if our GI colleagues are willing to come to our conferences and review these cases and be with these patients and longitudinally, I say that's fine. But that doesn't mean they're the only ones qualified to do it. Many of the surgeons have advanced endoscopic skills and should be going to the courses and offering this as well within their respective institution, for sure.
Great. And then you brought up, I guess, the crux of the second comment / question, where someone is asking whether you think surgeons should continue to follow patients for the duration of their life after surgery.
I think the answer is you should be willing to offer them lifelong follow-up. Some people do that with a program fee that helps trying to cover the offset costs of some of these things that are not reimbursable from some of our valued colleagues in integrated health, where some of these nutrition visits and things of this are not covered. Others don't charge or patients can't afford the program or facility fee, and therefore, don't follow up as much. I think the key is we should offer it within our program, but we should, as surgeons, but we also need to be able to empower our primary care colleagues, particularly those who are ASBMS certified, which is the American Board of Obesity Medicine. It's different than the focused practice designation surgical certification that I shared earlier. And I think that's a great way then, particularly after the first year or two, to begin to transition the longer term follow-up, still seen under the multidisciplinary metabolic bariatric surgical team. But honestly, after year 5, 6, 7, am I really the best person to be talking to you about iron deficiency anemia and the management of that? Unless, yes, if there's a marginal ulcer involved, but if there isn't, and it's just dietary and it might need IV iron or different changes than that, some of our ASBMS certified medical colleagues are maybe even better served to be in a position to take care of those patients under this multidisciplinary team long term.
Excellent. So I don't have any more questions. I'm not sure if you did, Dr. Dan.
Well, I would just want to reiterate the importance of engaging our obesity medicine colleagues. And some institutions, like I said, my own, we're just very lucky to have 3 or 4 of them who can assist with that kind of long-term follow-up. Mm-hmm. I always tell my patients bariatric surgery is a couple hours of your life, and then there's the rest of your life. And that's very important to have good follow-up. And we've been fortunate enough to be so busy it'd be impossible for most of us to keep taking care of our patients as a surgeon for the rest of their lives. But our obesity medicine doctors are such a vital part of what we do. They're very important. So with that, I want to thank Dr. Kothari. I want to thank all the moderators, everybody involved in the Fellows Project. And Dr. Kothari, was very informative, extremely well received review of what's going on in our specialty. We thank you for everything that you do, for your excellent effort, for your time, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much. Thanks again. Looking forward to meeting all of you fellows at one of our national in-person meetings. And thank you, Julianne, Adrian, for all that you do for our society.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month.